we can look back to Desktop Underwriter in 1995. So in 1995, the cost to originate a loan was around $3,500. And Fannie Mae at that time had a mandate to take $1,000 out of that cost to originate, which is a massive gain. And Desktop Underwriter was born.
Welcome to Actualizing Success. In this podcast series, our in-house advisors discuss today's finance and technology topics with an emphasis on solutions that embrace tomorrow.
Today, we've got a really interesting conversation, and it includes a guest from Phoenix team. Tela Mathias is going to join me. Gosh, it's been about 6 or 7 years. We first started to work together, our two companies, at VA quite a while ago. And all I remember when I first met Tela was how she was more busy than anybody else in the room. She had her kit with her. She had her markers and her sticky notes and was just in charge of all of the different brainstorming and requirement sessions. It's something I'll never forget. And quite honestly, have really watched some of the things that Phoenix team has done over the years. We've worked together, as I mentioned, at VA and also with rural development and at MISMO. And so with all that said, Tela is an industry veteran. She's one of the founders and owners of Phoenix team. And I don't think she's got quite as many years as I do in the industry. But with that said, she's gaining years over year. I'm sure she thinks she's been in the business for a long time. A little bit of a badge of honor, I suppose. But Tela, if you could just introduce yourself.
Thanks so much for having me. And that toolkit, I used to call that the modern reengineering toolkit, the Post-it notes and the markers. So thanks for that. And thanks for having me on. Tela Mathias, 25 years, mortgage, technology, design, delivery, implementation, and care. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Phoenix team. I'm also the Chief Executive and the Chief Technology Officer of Phoenix First, which is a generative AI technology startup. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, again, if you look at what Phoenix has going on, there's a lot in this space. And at the end, Tela can talk a little bit about how you can get to that stuff. But I'm going to start out with a trick question. When do you think we'll see AI in the mortgage origination space? When will we start to see it?
And I love this question because it is a trick question. And I think we've seen a lot of buzz and panic around, all right, what's our AI strategy here in mortgage? And the reality is that we've seen the more traditional or narrow forms of artificial intelligence in mortgage for decades. Primarily in mortgage, we see 4 types of artificial intelligence. We see computer vision. You can think of that as your optical character recognition type technology. We see expert systems. So think of your rules-based, deterministic systems. Desktop Underwriter being the best example, I think, in the origination space. Machine learning. So you can think about using, especially post-2008, you can think, predictive analytics and other techniques around automated valuation models. And then, of course, natural language processing, which has been in use in call centers for quite some time. So we've really seen narrow forms of AI in mortgage origination for many, many years. The technology that's coming in now that's getting everyone all excited is really around large language models and these generative technologies to create new content.
It's awesome. And again, that wasn't real tricky. It was just to get the conversation moving along. But you touched on some of the stuff about what we see now. But I guess, what do you think is right now, not in the future, is the biggest lift in terms of how AI and maybe even Gen AI is impacting the market?
And I think it's going to be interesting to see who really gets the edge. I think that the edge when it comes to artificial intelligence and especially generative technologies in origination has really yet to be seized. And if we look at what has historically really moved the needle in mortgage loan origination, we can look back to Desktop Underwriter in 1995. So in 1995, the cost to originate a loan was around $3,500. And Fannie Mae at that time had a mandate to take $1,000 out of that cost to originate, which is a massive gain. And desktop underwriter was born. It had, roughly 1,700 rules. The innovation that they extended to rules-based systems that had been in use by the likes of Countrywide at the time was to also intersect credit scoring with the rules-based system. And that is, some would argue, the largest technology innovation in mortgage loan origination ever. So if we fast forward to today, we've seen cost to originate has continued to increase. We continue to buckle under the regulatory pressures. And, it's my belief that anything short of a innovation that allows us to take large chunks of cost out of origination, that I think is the edge that is to be seen. That is, I think, what I'm hoping for. And I think there are going to be some significant barriers, because if we're going to take big costs out of the cost to originate, that is going to come with a need to be able to demonstrate that what we've done is compliant. And that's very, very hard right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And what's funny is that you mentioned desktop underwriter. At the same time, I was working at Freddie Mac when they were putting out Loan Prospector, and that was really the arms race between the two of them. And I think some folks don't remember that they used to charge for these tools, and I think it was maybe $10, but it was nominal. And now all of the technology that both companies have is free and has really moved the needle. But to your point, I do think that is the really big technology advancement, even probably I'd argue to about the year 2020. Personally, I think there's a big opportunity in the origination space. Maybe it's not exactly classified as such, but in the lead gen and the know your customer piece, and I think it'll be interesting. Maybe not in the origination part, but in servicing, to really start understanding the personas of the borrowers. What are their patterns? And you can combine some of the AI methods and tools that you mentioned with some of the Gen AI. So, again, I think when you look at Rocket and what they did in terms of getting ground and so forth, it was very oriented towards how they manage the processes, both internally and with the borrower, potential borrower. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw someone come out of the woodwork with a little bit of a better mousetrap. I guess the next question really is, and I have two things I want to go over, and we can combine them, because I do think that there's a lot of trepidation in terms of the regulatory piece. And so what's your worldview? What does your crystal ball tell you in terms of where are we going to be next? And then how does that intersect or have a head-on collision with the regulatory space? And just how do you think it plays out?
I think that it is a fascinating landscape to watch right now, because the best advice that I can offer is that because rights and data is unsettled, because we don't have federal legislation or guidance of how these technologies are to be used, we really have to anticipate where the puck is going to go. So, I think when we see companies that have a responsible but still aggressive posture on adopting innovation, I think that's where we're going to see things have to go. Rights and data is a big issue right now. If we look at the lawsuits that are against OpenAI, and then to a lesser extent Anthropic, this is all around intellectual property infringement. This is around, what can we use and what can't we use? And I think that extends into mortgage in the form of, what type of data are these models being trained on? The other things that the flip side, so that's the data that's going in. The data that's coming out is, I think, for mortgage, a little bit of a more pressing problem. So how can we trust the data that's coming out? So if we look at these generative technologies, they are approximating or mimicking human intelligence. that means, because these technologies are not deterministic, they are probabilistic, we cannot say with 100% certainty that the result you get is accurate. And we know better than most industries in mortgage that it's not sufficient to be compliant, to have met the rule. We have to be able to provide evidence that we met the rule. We have to be able to provide transparency into how our technologies work. We have to be able to stand by the veracity or the truthfulness of our answers. And those are things today that can't be done. So I think it's going to be a few who take a responsible attitude towards capturing the opportunity enabled by this innovation. You're right to kind of call out, the first online mortgage in 2015. What was also really innovative in around that time horizon was the Zestimate of all things, right? We saw the first consumer use of automated valuation models. So it's going to take kind of a brave but responsible site. I also think, to your point, new ways of doing things will emerge. You're absolutely right to point out that lead generation or that marketing angle. I've always been sort of fascinated by what I've called a consumer-led underwriting process. So what if we could use generative technologies as a consumer, and the consumer could somehow begin to market themselves as an opportunity? I think there's a lot of untapped ideas and ways that we can really rethink the business of mortgage loan origination. And I think that's going to be hard to do with our regulatory landscape, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think the edge is really yet to be seized.
Yeah. I want to go over one thing with you. I think your point about the consumer or the borrower, I've talked about this for several years, that it is exactly going to happen like the real estate market, where you mentioned Zestimate, Zillow, Redfin, whatever it is. The potential homeowner was able to take advantage of the transparency of data that they never could have seen. When I got my first house, it was in the 90s, and I was able to see whatever houses my realtor wanted to show me. I didn't have any access to the MLS or anything like a Zillow or a Redfin. And so I think that piece is really, really interesting, and maybe it's a topic for another podcast, but, just digging in a little bit beneath the surface, you have all the tools you need. You have the AVMs, you have income and asset verification. You've got access to borrowers' information as they see fit to give it, credit, of course. But I do think that if you could think about a model where the potential homeowner / borrower could set up a journey for themselves that starts maybe well ahead of when they can actually get into the house, they would be able to understand, okay, now I've matched up my credit, my capacity, and how much of house I can afford. And then instead of maybe saying, I want to make an offer on the house, they say, here I am. Somebody should loan me money, and then I'll get in touch with the realtor and I'll manage the whole process. I think that's real, Tela, and I think that it's just a matter, to your point. Somebody's going to jump in and they're going to go after it in a big way. So that said, I think the other piece that's interesting to me in all of this, and again, I don't know what the stats are on the lead gen in terms of the total dollar amount. I've heard different numbers, and of course it's different depending on retail versus third party, but it's a lot of money. And if I'm a loan officer, I love this model. I just get fed pre-qualified borrowers, but we'll see how it plays out. And then I think the other piece that has been problematic more so than anything, and you know this because your company, you personally have worked on the exact same model I'm going to talk about, is that the main players in the mortgage tech space, they bring a fairly decent suite of product to the table. However, the mortgage company executives, technologists, loan officers, they don't necessarily go that direction. What I've seen more so is I'll take an anchor on, let's say, an LOS, and then maybe I'll add a POS. I need a compliance and rules technology. I need pricing and product and potentially hedging and all of these things. And they don't necessarily want to leverage the one brand. And so what you see is a complete mess and a lot of extra cost, I do believe. But I also think that when you extrapolate that same model and include the AI capabilities, it'll be interesting to watch and see how, say, ICE AI capabilities match up or they don't match up. Let's just say Citus AMC's hedging and other technologies, or anybody in the industry for that matter. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the AI and AI working together in that origination space plays itself out, because I don't know that that's going to be a friendly integration necessarily. But at the same time, I also think we need to change the paradigm in terms of how all the technologies fit together. So again, I think we'll see. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I do, and it's interesting because I have the great privilege of being able to be out on the Gen AI circuit and the mainstream technology circuits, and then bring some of those learnings into the mortgage space. And I agree with what you're saying. You can look at there's a payments company called Klarna. Klarna was one of the first companies to come out and actively say, we are terminating our contracts with Salesforce and Workday because we are going to use generative technologies to replace those technologies. Now, do I think a generative AI-based solution is going to replace, let's say, your core LOS that you've invested in for the past 30 years? Question mark, right? It sounds like a pretty tall order, but what I have seen we can do with these generative technologies is absolutely mind-blowing and is limited only by human creativity. When we look at the technology landscape in mortgage loan origination, we see the classic, mothership satellite architecture, right? We have, the core loan origination system around which we put many satellites, many, other planets that kind of orbit that core. We see that also in the servicing space. It's even more pronounced in the servicing space. I think we're going to see the use of generative technologies to ease integration, to understand better what many of these constellation of applications do. It's very difficult today in origination to really understand. I could have dozens, if not hundreds, of wrap applications or ancillary technologies that are used to meet my process. What are the data contracts? This is a place we can use Gen AI to understand and learn, and potentially even stand up new integrations. Maybe we even stand up new integrations in accordance with NISMO standards, right? Which is these are all things that when we think about them and put our best heads with generative technologies together, these are things that can very much be figured out. And I think we're going to see a lot of that with our most innovative players start to really be explored. I would love, and I'm not sure anymore with generative AI, so I'm kind of open to everything. I'd love to see somebody come out with a mortgage large language model. So we don't have that. That's not out there. There is a wild difference between, a conversational chat bot that is, or RAG bot, retrieval augmented generation, that is augmented with, say, the origination guides, right? Everybody's got one of those, and those are super useful. But a true large language model trained on mortgage specific data, I think that would be really neat. And, I think the big players out there are pretty closed lips right now on big AI strategies. I think we're seeing smaller and mid-sized AI strategies. I think it'd be really neat to see what we can do if we get a true large language model. I prefer it not to be, held hostage, because I'm of the view that I'd like to see AI for everyone, and I'd love to see us level up as an entire industry. And I do think, last point on kind of technology innovation in mortgage loan origination, we've seen many players come in. Silicon Valley comes in all the time, and they're real excited, and they bring a lot of money, and it's not enough money, and inevitably, it kind of dies a sad death, and they leave, right? And why do they leave? Because it's a lot harder than anybody thinks. I am hopeful, and I believe that these new generative technologies potentially are going to let us leapfrog where we've been. Because what's the rub, right? Well, when you invest 60 years in a piece of technology, very, very difficult to understand, well, what does that technology even do? How does it do it? Perfect case for using a large language model, understanding what a thing does. I mean, that's like right in the wheelhouse. So there's so much promise and opportunity here for us and for the industry. And I'm excited to see where technology goes.
Yeah, me too. And I think your point is extremely right on the money in terms of Silicon Valley, and we've seen lots of them. A lot of very smart people, technology-wise, but it's really difficult to explain how the mortgage business works. And the interesting part is that when you look at the whole supply chain from lead gen through securitization, most people that are part of that couldn't even explain the other parts. So that said, Tela, we're running up against the clock here, and I want to give you a chance to tell the listeners a little bit more about what Phoenix Team's doing, what the startup's up to, and how they can get more information about that.
Thanks so much. And I really enjoyed the conversation. So, at Phoenix Team, we are and continue to be a mortgage operations and technology advisory services company powered by generative AI. So we're always here to help the industry solve their hardest strategy problems with technology. My tech startup is a product called Phoenix Burst. It is an application built on top of generative AI technologies. And we are here to really tackle the problem of change in the industry, which is kind of the problem, right? So when we have regulatory change, how can we understand that change and promulgate that throughout all parts of our people, process, and technology? And that's what Phoenix Burst is all about. And I would say where I'm personally spending a lot of my time is in helping the industry understand. We're really excited. In the next little while, we'll be announcing a partnership with the Mortgage Bankers Association to bring generative AI training to the industry. So we're excited about that because we do think AI is for everyone. We do think that when used responsibly, these generative AI technologies are going to improve the world as well as our workforce here in mortgage. So you can always learn more at phoenixoutcomes.com or phoenixburst.ai. Thank you so much for the chance to be here today.
Tela, it's awesome. Again, I'll see you throughout the industry and as we work together. And I think that most people know where they can find information on Actualize. The listeners to this podcast will have things on LinkedIn. So again, thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Actualizing Success. Make sure to visit us online at www.actualizeconsulting.com, where you can explore our service offerings. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred platform. If you've enjoyed what we talked about today, please consider leaving a review and following us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or would like to share your opinions with us, please send us a note at podcast@actualizeconsulting.com. We look forward to hearing from you.